Today, June 29, 2018, the Poor Clare Monastery of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in Betis, Pampanga, celebrates its Golden Foundation anniversary. 50 years of acts of daring, of trusting in the guidance and providence of God.
The erection of a Poor Clare Monastery in the Archdiocese of San Fernando, Pampanga is God's project. He touched lives and moved hearts to build this holy dwelling place here in Betis, Pampanga. And He sent courageous, trusting, and loving women to make this place a house of prayer.
In the 1940s, two young ladies, members of the Pecson family, a well-to-do family in Betis, Pampanga, entered the Monasterio Real de Santa Clara, which was then in Intramuros, Manila. Their names were Elena and Josefa Pecson. Of the two sisters, only Josefa Pecson persevered in the monastery. Elena, on the other hand, realized that God had called her to another kind of life. She returned to her family and would later become the key person in the founding of the monastery in Betis, Pampanga.
Ay baloy po ako'y kung talagang lagyo ko'y Mrs. Consuelo J. Mendoza. Panghanda po rin ang adong mig Madre Santa Clara, yapin po Josepo, ang po Eleno. Dapat po itang Josepo, may laos siya po, may teya pa po king Santa Clara, king Intramuros. O nang Elena po, yamin niya sa uling may sakit siya. Ngayon po at itapong kwarto kita, itang pangatlong kwarto, yan kwarto na ito. At misa na doon niya po 1972, uling malatiya pa po Santa Clara, yung chapel ng Santa Clara, lalbugya pa po. Uling maluwat po yung danom kanito, yung tala po kay niring madre, kay nila po, lenok na nga hanggang makalbugya po itang chapel. Pero ngayon po masanting na itang chapel ka rin. Ngayon, Misa Neldo po, makanami po mira si Santa Clara ngayon ken, uli na po nitang Sor Carmen, yung taya po keti, may nyadya pong gabon, lugal, paglugalan ni Santa Clara. Bangkanita po kanumi ka Santa Clara. Agad-agad naman po, tinangula po retang darap keni para niya biyaya po in Santa Clara keto. Malungkot pa po banda ka rin, may saya po ngeni, huli na ng Santa Clara. At bala po, karinla po sisi niya pong mabiyayang dara ko itang Elena, itapong Emelaos na may sakit, karinya po sisimbo. Ngayon po, in Santa Clara ngayon po, may ngailangan niya pa pong parking space. So, binyemine naman po itang ketang harap na ni Santa Clara. Niyang kaya may ngailangan la pong hermitage. Binyemia naman po itang hermitage sa kagamitan dangini. At atangga po ngayon, ketang kaya mi sasawke po at ako marlas ko namang sisimba ka rin king Santa Clara. Lalong-lalo na po na yung Magnovena, ng August 11 para kayong piyesta ng Santa Clara, sisimbake po ka rin.
During the liberation of Manila in 1945, the Poor Clare Monastery in Intramuros was reduced to ruins. The nuns were forced to move out and were temporarily housed in the Serafico Colegio in San Francisco del Monte, Quezon City. This was the Franciscan seminary, which at that time was unoccupied because of the war. After some time, the Poor Clares transferred to another house along Aurora Boulevard in Quezon City. Here, the devotees of St. Clare continued to grow in numbers. At the same time, more and more vocations of the monastic life kept coming in, so that when the number of sisters had grown, they began founding monasteries of St. Clare in other places. They established monasteries in Calbayog, Samar, in Sariaya, Quezon, and then in Betis, Pampanga.
The establishment of the Poor Clare Monastery in Betis bloomed out of the generous hearts of the sisters who were inspired to reach out to other places. Mother Carmen shared this desire to her close friend, Doña Elena Pexon, who was just so happy to be able to help realize the sisters' dreams.
The sisters in the monastery could not contain their joy when they learned of the generous offer of the Pexon family, for they offered not only a piece of land for the monastery, but also promised to support the needs of the sisters while they were not yet able to support themselves in their new monastery.
Without delay, the sisters went to the Bishop of San Fernando, Pampanga, to obtain his permission to establish a monastery in his diocese. Bishop Emilio Sinense Didi joyfully welcomed the Poor Clares in his diocese. On July 1, 1963, he gave his approval to the sisters to construct a monastery in Betis, Guagua, Pampanga.
Filled with hope, the sisters immediately contacted people to form construction committee to build our monastery. The group was led by Michelle Macapagal, daughter of the late former President Diosdado Macapagal.
With money from donations and generous benefactors, the construction of the monastery in Betis began. The progress of the work was watched by curious eyes of the local people, who were happily anticipating the arrival of the Poor Clare nuns in their neighborhood.
The construction of the monastery was underway when 5 sisters from Real Monastery de Santa Clara in Quezon City arrived in Betis in 1968. Soon after, 3 Poor Clares from Sariaya, Quezon followed to join them. The pioneering group, led by Mother Carmen de San Miguel, received a warm welcome with a solemn mass and the partial blessing of the new monastery with Father Luis Contreras, OFM, the Franciscan Delegate General, and also then the chaplain of the Poor Clares in Quezon City.
The pioneers faced many challenges during the initial stage of their monastic life in Betis. The construction of the community was still going on. They had to occupy only a small portion that already served as dormitory, kitchen, and prayer room. This little spot was served as venue for liturgical services that was open to the public.
Truly, they had all kinds of difficulties, but the sisters did not surrender to the trials. They stood strong, determined, and open to the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. They tried their best to live the gospel in ways that were creative and courageous, rooted in their trust in the divine providence.
One of the problems that caused so much pressure on the sisters was the instruction of the bishop for them to finish the construction of the monastery on a definite date. In humble obedience to the bishop, the sisters were compelled to go out of the cloister to all the towns in Pampanga and to other places in order to beg for and solicit funds. They also made candies and ice candies and asked volunteers to sell them to students in nearby schools. Truly, God must have been on their side because many people generously responded to their needs. Some wanted to help in the work of the sisters. Some came to help clean the grounds of the monastery still under construction. Others came to help in the construction themselves.
The Poor Clares had to bear and suffer many trials, but God also knew how to comfort them and reward them for their sacrifices. Young ladies
soon began to get attracted to the presence and life of the sisters. In a short time, aspirants were accepted for the initial formation. Truly, each timid knock of the applicant on the doors of the monastery brought great joy to the community.
In 1970, 2 years after the pioneers arrived, they celebrated the blessing of their monastery in Betis, Pampanga. The monastery is officially called Monasterio de Santa Clara del Sagrado Corazón de Jesus. The blessing was officiated by Bishop Emilio Sinense of the Diocese of San Fernando. The event was attended by Franciscan friars, the benefactors, members of the clergy, and friends.
The Franciscan friars were in full support to the pioneers, visiting them regularly to give impulse on Franciscan spirituality, to celebrate Mass specially on special occasions, such as sisters' profession, jubilees, and to hear their confessions.
The Salesians of Don Bosco in Bacolor were the first chaplains of our community. Out of our gratitude to them, we offered them a small service to wash their sacred linens. Likewise, the sisters received visits from members of the Pampanga clergy to celebrate Mass, to conduct retreats, and to give conferences to the sisters. Devotion to our Holy Mother Saint Clare apparently increased, and more people frequented our place for personal prayers, to attend Mass, to visit the Blessed Sacrament, and to request prayers from the sisters. They have received so much spiritual graces and found consolation and peace in our place, named after the most sacred heart of Jesus.
In 1972, Betis and the neighboring areas were affected by a huge flood. There was no dry ground to walk on. The sisters left the monastery for a few days and were accommodated in the house of Doña Elena Pecson. The leader, Mother Carmen de San Miguel, volunteered to stay in the monastery.
The number of devotees of St. Clare was constantly increasing. The crowd of people that came for the fiesta of the saint was always larger than that of the previous years. God must have touched many lives in Pampanga and nearby places through the intercession of St. Clare of Assisi.
The sisters grieved over the loss of Mother Remedios de San Buenaventura on March 29, 1979. She was buried in Real Monasterio in Quezon City, and after 6 years, her body was transferred to Betis. By that time, Mother Carmen de San Miguel, the foundress and abbess of the Poor Clare Monastery, was becoming physically weak because of her old age. She was already 81 years old. On May 3, 1981, she peacefully breathed her last, with her face radiant with a faint smile, as if she died thanking God for allowing her to see the fruits of her prayers and sacrifices in establishing the monastery in Betis, Pampanga.
Shortly after the death of Mother Carmen, Mrs. Consuelo Jose Mendoza donated to the sisters a lot of 8,006 square meters in memory of her aunt, Isabel Pecson, which they developed into an hermitage, an exclusive place of solitude and intense prayer for the sisters. It was blessed on May 1, 1983, by Father Benny Baisas, OFM,
the Minister Provincial of the Franciscans in the Philippines.
Meanwhile, two of the original pioneers, Sor Teresita del Niño Jesus and Sor Zoila de San Joaquin, left Betis Monastery to help the founding group of the Cebu Monastery. Sor Maria del Espiritu Santo transferred to the Real Monasterio in Quezon City. Mother Ana Regina Pena transferred to the Monastery of Poor Clares in Calbayog, Samar.
The Holy Spirit continued to inspire young ladies to join our community. And so we needed to provide more rooms for new incoming candidates. In 1988, we had the blessing of our new novitiate, which was blessed by His Excellency Archbishop Oscar V. Cruz. And this brought so much joy to our community that we had a new place for our 4 months and more new coming candidates.
Led to the invitation of the Bishop of Bataan to establish a monastery in Balanga, Bataan. 8 sisters volunteered, led by Mother Adoracion de la Pasión. And in 1991, the new Poor Clare Monastery in Bataan, the daughter monastery of Betis, was canonically erected.
On June 15, 1991, Mount Pinatubo, a huge mountain which had remained quiet for the past 400 years, suddenly erupted. It spewed thick, hot ashes so high up in the sky, forming dark clouds of volcanic ashes, covering populated areas hundreds of miles across. When it rained, Mount Pinatubo would produce high-speed avalanches of giant mud flows that buried farms and houses along their paths.
At the beginning of the eruption of Mount Pinatubo, there was inexplicable darkness, and I thought it was just an eclipse. And when we saw our clothes that were hung outside filled with mud, we were alarmed. And much more when we heard the news about the eruption of Mount Pinatubo and its destructive effects. There were constant earthquakes, lightnings, thunderstorms, and news about barrios and towns being buried with lahar. And this brought us the feelings of uncertainties and fears. With this experience, we were one with the struggles of all the people who were affected by these calamities. We brought them all to God in prayer. This experience strengthened our faith and trust in the all-powerful and merciful God.
We were always afraid when it rained. The sisters were alert all the times to pack their things when flood waters get to their beds and transfer to the novitiate, one of our high place in case of emergency. There was a time that we needed to bring Mother Dolores, our elderly, together with the 4 months to the Real Monasterio in Quezon City to keep them safe because the situation was getting worse. We started making some repair on our drainage system. We elevated our monastery grounds and did some renovations of our existing structures, particularly the dormitory and the kitchen. In February 1996, Mother Maria de los Dolores passed away, one of our pioneers.
The special occasion of our 25th foundation anniversary in June 1993 gave way for the sisters from other monasteries and the devotees of our Holy Mother Saint Clare to see our situation. Eventually, we sought help to renovate our chapel. After 8 years, we finally decided to reconstruct it through the initiative of the late Monsignor Felipe Pangilinan, and this time, making it stand on a much elevated ground. On June 6, 2008, On the occasion of the Ruby Jubilee of our monastery, the new chapel was blessed and its altar consecrated. And the chapel served as the venue for the visit of the relic of Saint Clare to the monastery in February 2012.
With the new chapel standing on high ground, the adjacent old torno and the parlor where people came for their prayer requests just did not match. And besides, the place was still a victim of constant flooding.
In 2010, we demolished one wing of the monastery and replaced it with a new wing that would serve as the torno, the parlor, the priest rooms, the offices, the dining, and the conference room, and the library. We could all say that this is a miracle building because, left to our own means, we could never put up such a huge facility in a short time. On October 28, 2011, Father Antonio Rosales, OFM, blessed this new building.
In 2015, we started developing our hermitage, and we feel blessed and happy to have this beautiful place for prayer.
Today, June 29, 2018, we celebrate with great joy our golden anniversary. The foundation of this monastery is God. He made it stand steadfast and strong despite the threats of calamities and the vulnerabilities of the sisters. He is forever merciful and faithful. We wish to reach out to you with profound gratitude and to the many people who have been chosen by God to be our partners in the work of evangelization in the local church of the Archdiocese of San Fernando, Pampanga. We express our heartfelt appreciation for your continued faith in the life and vocation of the Poor Clares, made possible through your love and generosity. Dakal pong dakala salamat. Thank you very much. May God be praised forever.
The Poor Clare Monastery of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. On the surface, it looks so grand, so proud, and even perhaps so imposing. But behind this beautiful facade is the humble story of some few nuns who physically look so fragile, but whose faith in God was like a piece of jewel embedded in a hard rock. Some of the pioneers in this monastery had returned to the Father. The others are still holding on. But their faith and trust in divine providence have been handed down to the younger generation of sisters that follow them. With this kind of sisters, whose hearts are truly filled with love for God, for 50 years and more, this monastery will continue to receive the outpouring of grace from the Sacred Heart of Jesus.